Good morning, everyone. Jan Hicks of Jan Hicks Creates here. It is Monday morning. Let's see, 10:37 on Monday, September 10th. And I'm coming to you today with a little bit of an instructional video. I've had a couple different requests. I'd mentioned on my last video that I had all kinds of ideas for future videos. One of them was talking a little bit more about how I stitch in hand and how I manage fabric. So I'm going to do a few tips. I'm bumping. See, I'm out of practice on this whole doing a stitch with me video. I'm bumping the phone again. So I'm going to go through some of the different projects and show you how I manage fabric with the different amounts of fabric for different projects. But one of the other requests I had, Andy, Nana's Needles, yesterday commented on my video from Friday that she's perplexed about the Algerian Eye Stitch on the 'Tis the Season Sal. And she would love if I would do a video on that. So I'm going to start this. That's what I'm doing now. I'm going to start this video showing you how to do the Algerian Eye Stitch. And then I'll move on to the stitching in hand technique. And of course, that's what I'm doing right now. I do use the sewing method and kind of give you some tips and tricks on how to do that. So the Algerian Eye Stitch, I'm going to show you just a little piece of the chart from 'Tis the Season to show you what it looks like on the chart. Let me have my needle. So this is how it's charted. So you have cross stitches surrounding it, 2, 2, 2, 2 on each side, and then you have the Algerian Eye Stitch, which is the straight stitches in the middle. Now the chart shows this heart, and the heart is indicating the red floss. The chart shows this heart in the middle as if you would do another X in the middle of this. I don't know whether that may just be indicating the color of the floss. It says in the instructions to begin with, and excuse the mess, this is all of my mess with figuring out what colors of floss I wanted to use for this. But it does say that you're stitching it with the poison apple floss, the red floss color. So that may be what that little heart in the middle indicates. I don't know. I certainly didn't put an X in the middle of the stitch once I was done. So basically just ignore that heart in the middle there. So you stitch the outer crosses first, and that's what I'm doing. And then we'll look at the diagram here. It says you're going to be stitching it over 4 linen threads. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4. But each length, each straight stitch is only going over 2. So the stitch in total is over 4 threads, but each straight stitch you're putting in is going over 2. And you always come up on the outer one of the 2 and go down in the middle. I did not, you notice this does not say Eyelet Stitch. Perhaps it's supposed to, I am not sure. Algerian Eye Stitch. In a typical eyelet stitch, when you put the thread down in the middle and come up again on the next one, you're kind of giving a little bit of a tug to open up that center. I did that a little bit on mine, but not a whole lot. If you look at my completed ones, you can see that they're opened up a little bit, but I didn't make it too obvious. I don't know whether we were supposed to or not. I decided I didn't want to do that. So anyway, now that I have my needle all twisted around here, let me go ahead and finish this last cross stitch. And again, the sewing method, I have my middle finger down underneath the fabric, right where my needle's going down. And my needle basically bounces off of it, and then I use, it's a motion between manipulating the fabric with my thumb and the finger underneath to kind of pull those threads apart that I need to go under. And I'm not really pulling apart, it's just kind of accentuating the hole more than anything, and then coming through. Now, so this is the final leg of this stitch, of this cross stitch, so I will be starting my Algerian eye stitch. The diagram shows you starting down here in the lower left corner. In my opinion, it does not matter where you start for the most part. My cross stitch is finishing up here, so I could certainly go down and start it in the lower left corner, and that's what I will do. One thing you do not want to do is start, like if you're ending over here on the left side, you don't want to come over and have your thread across the center opening and start over here on the right side. You always want to keep it on the same side so you're not bringing that thread across that center hole. Especially if you are opening up that hole more, you don't want to have a thread coming across it in the back, right, that you can see. So I'm just going to finish up my cross there. So I am going to start down here in the lower right or lower left corner, and according to the diagram, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we are going counterclockwise. So I bring it up on the outside, go over 2 stitches, and come down in the center. And I'm going to use the sewing method because it's quicker for me. And then the next stitch comes out in the bottom, right? So there's the corner in between those 2 stitches. There are some other stitches out there where you would come up in every hole. Basically, you're coming up in the corners of the cross stitches, your regular cross stitch holes. So down in the center, back up in the corner. Does that make sense, your regular cross stitch holes? I'm not coming up in the middle, in that thread there, in the middle of the cross stitch. I'm coming up in the corner, just one of my regular crosses. Fixing that cross stitch because it's a little wonky. Back down in the center. And you can see I've stopped using the sewing method because going from left to right, having to go that way just becomes too awkward, and it slows me down more than it helps. So down into the center, up in the upper right corner, giving it a little tug to open it up a little bit, but not too much. Down in the center, up in the oh shoot, there goes my needle. One of the reasons I don't like to poke and stab is because I often catch my hand in my needle and pull it out and throw it around. Okay, up in the top, down in the center, up in the upper left corner, down in the center, and there's my sewing method again. Up in the side left, down in the center. And that's really all there is to it. And then you just catch your end your thread in the back and you're done. So it is fairly simple. You know, I think a lot of times we have a tendency to be afraid to try different things, and the more we delay and put off and worry about it, the bigger it seems in our mind. But it's really not hard at all. That's all there is to that. So I'm going to go ahead and end that, and then I'm going to start talking about knitting in hand. Yep, it would be good to knit in hand, wouldn't it? It'd be kind of hard if you didn't use your hands to knit. I guess you can use a knitting machine, but you're still using your hands. But anyways, stitching in hand and the sewing method and managing fabric. Oh, for heaven's sakes. Let's just get this at the right angle so I can actually do this. Doesn't help that the lighting isn't the best in here today. We do have, well, we don't have to worry about the hurricane quite yet. That's still quite a day. There's chances of rain every day, and then once the hurricane starts coming closer, it's just going to be a mess this weekend. All right, so I'll put this needle out of the way, and hopefully I will remember I put it over on that pin cushion. All right, let me get all, oh, I bumped you again, I'm sorry. Get all my charts out of the way for 'Tis the Season, because now we're just going to be talking about stitching and showing you samples. All right, so as you can see with my stitching in hand, see how that's just rolling up on me? Because it's used to being rolled up. I always start, well, not always, but for the most part, I start my projects in the upper left corner. I know a lot of people that stitch in hand will start in the upper right, because that way, and they'll still roll their fabric in, but that way they don't have their hands on any of their stitching. They're starting over here and working this way. They'll roll their fabric in this way, but their hands aren't touching even the back of their stitching. That's actually a very good idea. I just have never, I'm not in the habit of that, so I don't think about it before I start. But it's kind of hard because this is, you know, up close and it's a smaller screen. But so I have this big piece of fabric for my 'Tis the Season, right? I have the right side rolled in that I'm not using yet, and I just use these kind of bendy, snappy hairpin things to clip them. I've tried a variety of different things. I've tried bigger clips. I have the canvas clips that you use to roll up canvas and keep the canvas held together for when you're doing needlepoint. These aren't real heavy, but I found that they're heavy enough that it drags this down. And you don't want to have a whole lot of weight dragging your fabric down. Now, having said that, for the most part, this side is just sitting in my lap. But depending on how big of a piece of fabric you have, where you're working, how far up, and I'm holding this too close, but how close to your face you want to have your fabric, any extra weight can really just make this drag you down and just make it hard to manage. So I find the lightest hair clips that I can, and I just keep that side rolled up as much as possible. And of course then you unroll it and just reclip it as you start working over to that side. Now my left side, like I said, I'm starting in the upper left. My left side, I'm rolling as I go. So, you know, not a whole lot of roll over on this side as I'm starting, and then as I'm moving across the piece of fabric, this gets rolled up. So even though I am touching the stitches, and I am when I'm working often, let me come over here to where I'm working. So say I was working on this Algerian eyelet. I may have still my fingers on the front like this. You know, my thumb's going to be on the front of some of the stitches. Again, that's might be why it would be a good reason to start over here on the right side. I need to remember that. I'm also very diligent about cleaning my hands. I'm kind of OCD about cleaning my hands. Anytime my fingers start to feel sticky on the needle, I will get up and wash them because I really hate that. So anyway, that is, I find rolling, you know, a lot of people might scrunch like that. Again, you're getting more touch on the front of your work. It also is going to create more wrinkles. You can see on linen, just that little bit has created a bit of a wrinkle here. So with the rolling, at least, it doesn't create the sharp edges that you get in a wrinkle. So, and you can see that is so used to being rolled up that it just goes and there. Okay, so that's a fairly good size piece. I have several other pieces here to talk about. This is Wilhelmina. This is one of my Stitch Mania starts that I have not gotten back to yet, but that certainly is a pretty little sheep and a pretty little piece, isn't it? This is a 32 count linen, so like a pearl gray linen. This one I would also, even though it's small, and like when I get over to this side, anything on this side, I won't have to roll it up as much. Still, if I'm working over here, I still will roll it a little bit. I could scrunch it again. I could scrunch it, but I try to keep my hands off the front of the work as much as possible, so I will roll that when I'm working over here and protect the stitches as much as possible. It would have to be a really small piece, like some of my ornaments, like this poor thing that still hasn't been finished. Oh, look, there's a cat hair. What a surprise. This one I wouldn't have rolled as much if I just had it at this size when I was working on it. I'm sure I cut it off some, but you know, this would have been just stitching like that. So, Indigo Lane. I pulled this out to show you, not only because I'm almost done with the grass, yay! This is a, I believe it's a Linda. So it's similar to the Jobelin and the Lugana in that it's a part rayon. It's not all cotton, it's not all linen, it's a part rayon mix. And it doesn't, it still has a tendency to roll in. But the one thing I really like is with these rayon fabrics is that they don't really hold the wrinkles that badly. There's a bit of a fold up here from where it's been folded in the drawer. But again, you know, when I'm working over here, I didn't have to roll it in too much, but as I progress across, I'm rolling this up. None of these that I've showed you so far are they're not long lengthwise, it's all widthwise, so I don't have a whole lot of fabric that I have to worry about down below here. It's just the side to side. Now I will say that one of the problems with the side to side is if you have a big piece. This is Harbor Haven. Look, I started on the leaves last night. Part 10, she did send out part 10 last night. So I'm happy with how close I am to finishing 9. I still have little bits and pieces of 8 to finish. But 9, I just have to finish these leaves, put in some back stitching, like I said, finish up that little bit. And then this is going to get put aside for just a little bit until later in September when I'll start on part 10. But anyways, this is a long piece, right? Really, really a long piece. Not long lengthwise, but widthwise. And so as I'm getting further and further and further along here and having to roll and roll and roll and roll and roll and roll and roll, and because of the method I am using sewing, because this is over 1, and I'm doing those longer stitches in the back, you can see it's quite a thick coverage on the back. You can see how this is like the 10 stitch or continental or basket weave. I'm not sure which one of those is the appropriate term. But in order to make it so that my stitches don't slip, because this is 1/1, don't slip between the linen threads, I do it over 2 in the back. And I do talk about that in depth in one of my Stitch With Me videos in May, one of my Mania videos. But you can see, as I'm rolling this up, this is getting to be a pretty thick chunk of fabric. And this is the one downside to this. Because I hold it like this, do I have any thread attached? I don't. Because I hold it like this, for the most part, when I'm stitching, so I have it between my thumb and forefinger and my middle fingers there, my left hand does start to get sore from holding it like this for long periods of time. Every once in a while, I'll take my forefinger and tuck it underneath just to give that more of a break. I'm more comfortable with it like this, stitching and sewing in hand like this, but there does get to be some strain coming through here because it's holding this big, thick roll of fabric. And of course, I still have 10, 11, and 12 to go, so I have more that I'm going to have to do. It's just I have to keep switching, you know, my forefinger on top, my forefinger below. And I can certainly stitch with the finger both ways. Both are equally comfortable as far as the actual method of stitching is concerned. But yeah, it's just, you know, one of the things to take into account when you're working with this. Nothing I can do about it, not like I'm going to change now. But that is one of the things about stitching in hand and rolling your fabric up like this. And even if I had started, well, I couldn't start on the left-hand side or the right-hand side because we don't have those charts yet, right? But if I was doing this after all the charts are out, even if I did start over there at some point, I'm going to have to work with all of the fabric rolled up and then work across. So anyways, the other issue is when you have a long piece of fabric. Now this is my Linen and Threads Mystery Stitch Along from 2017 that I'm only partway through. This was another one of my Mania starts that I haven't touched since. Long piece of fabric. You can see there's a lot rolled up down here, which probably won't get used because I've decided I am going to skip some of the bands. But I have it, and of course I have painter's tape to hold the edges on this. This side is actually serged. This side is not. So I just put painter's tape on. It's safe. It's not staying on. This part is going to get cut off anyways, so not a big deal. So I did the same thing, though. I have this rolled up as much as I need it to, and I have it clipped with one of those hair clips. And this, of course, just sits in my lap for the most part, this bottom roll, so it does not get in the way at all. The only problem that makes things a little bit difficult, and part of it is because I do have the painter's tape on here and I have it clipped over here. When I have to roll this in, this side in, to get into the center, or to get in over here to this side, this gets to be bulky. So I do have to play around with this a bit to make this work. Put this over, whoops, on the other side. And the painter's tape just makes it bulky to begin with. But again, it's just something I've learned to deal with. This is how I prefer to stitch. It helps me go faster. So yeah, there's different ways to handle it. I think rolling my fabric up works the best because it keeps a majority of the wrinkles out. I don't have the top rolled down yet. It's not too awfully long, but as I get further down, I will roll up the top. Of course, this just all lays in my lap, but I will roll up the top and again, roll it up, so that the stitching is protected, so that it's kept clean, so that I can keep as many cat hairs off of it as possible. I'll eventually roll that up and have that clipped too, so that it isn't flopping around as much. It's important to me to keep, on a piece like this, to keep this bottom rolled up, because when I do have to reach underneath, either, if I'm going at an awkward angle or something like that, I don't want to have to fight all this fabric to get underneath my piece. So I think that's about all I have for you today. You can see I have some charts laying here that I'm contemplating starting soon. Definitely going to be starting this one. I put my that new XG Designs fabric, the Dark Mountain fabric, in there. I think it's going to be gorgeous on that. So I'm going to be pulling the threads for that pretty soon. But anyway, that is all I have for you today. I hope that was useful. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to ask. Whoops! If you have anything you want me to show again or show closer, don't hesitate to ask. I do show a lot, as I said, a lot of stitching in hand, my sewing method, during my Stitch With Me Stitch Mania videos back in May. I have those all off on a separate playlist now on YouTube called Stitch Mania 2018, I believe. Excuse me, is what I call the playlist. But if you're looking at those and have any questions, or again want me to show something closer, explain something in more detail, just ask. I'm happy to do it. I will see you, like I said, I have tons more videos coming, lots of ideas. I have a special guest happening tomorrow for my normal Flosstube video, so I'm excited about that, and I will see you then. Have a great day. Stay dry, everybody, and let's hope for the best with this hurricane coming in. I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.